Hello, word nerds. We are live. It is Sunday, September 27th, 2020, which means it's the last Sunday in the quarter, which means it's book club. We are talking today about Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, which has gorgeous covers all around. Also gorgeous inside of book. I know I've talked about that a million times, but I adore the inside of this book.
What's the difference between mine and yours?
Canadian versus American.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the American cover.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Ellie, do you have one as well? Do you have this one?
No, I've seen that cover before.
Yeah, I think it might be the UK cover, maybe.
Yeah.
That you have.
Is that or it's just the paperback, or is the paperback?
Could just be the paperback.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
No.
Okay.
I read the ebook, so I'm good.
Yeah.
I have the arc, so
Yeah, I think I read an ebook of the arc, so I have no cover to speak of, really.
Yeah. So if this is your first time joining us for a book club, welcome. It says we've got 4 people watching, which is big for book club. And I'm not being sarcastic. That is big for book club. So welcome. We're really happy you're here. Yeah, usually each quarter we pick a book that we've heard good things about that will hopefully get us to read new things. And this is a book in verse, which was extremely out of my wheelhouse. And so I'm a little nervous about hosting because what if I say something dumb because I don't know novels in verse? But I am really excited. I really enjoyed this book. So we are going to get started with stars. That is what we do at the beginning. I haven't hosted a book club in a while either. So we're going to give it a rating out of 5 stars. And then we're just going to talk about how we liked it, things that we wish were different, things that were amazing, all our feels about the book. And yeah, so I guess I'll start. I want to say I gave it 4.5 stars. I should have looked it up on Goodreads beforehand, but I'm pretty sure it was 4.5 stars. I really liked it. It did make me feel things and tear up. So that almost always bumps a book up pretty quickly for me in star ranking. There were a couple pacing things, and where it ended was not where I expected it to end, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I liked it a lot. Big recommend. Also, we're going to spoil the crap out of this book. So if you don't want spoilers, maybe leave after our star ratings. Kelly?
It was a 4-star read for me. Definitely not a book I would have thought to pick up on my own because books in verse are not my jam. But I really, really enjoyed it. I didn't have any problem with the verse. I don't know if it necessarily added anything for me, but it didn't take away either, which is kind of all I can ask for because it was a story that was really interesting. And I wanted a bit more as well, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Emma?
It's a 5-star read for me. I have read all of Elizabeth Acevedo's books, and this is definitely my favorite one out of all of them. I think it's a really good story, and it's told really well. And I liked the 2 different sisters' points of view. And I also don't read novels in verse, and I've read maybe 3, and 2 of them were Elizabeth Acevedo's books. So I really like hers, and it makes novels in verse more accessible to me, where a lot of times I just don't get it. This one I read a hard copy, but I will say The Poet X, her debut novel, I listened to as an audiobook, and she narrates her own audiobooks. And she's a spoken word poet. That's where she got started with writing. And I highly recommend listening to her read her books.
Yeah, I really want to listen to this one. Mm-hmm. Erin, how about you?
I'm going to say 4 out of 5 as well, because I think as someone who is not a poetry fan, I don't feel like I would give it a lower rating just because of I'm grouchy and I don't like poetry. So I'm always that person, you see on Goodreads or whatever, who's I don't like children's books, so I give this a 3. And you're well, why did you read it then? I don't like that kind of rating. I don't think it's really fair. But I thought it was a very well written book, even if it's not to my taste. And it was interesting, and the characters were well developed. And yeah, like I don't really have any complaints other than that I would have liked to see more about the actual flight and like the crash and stuff that actually happened. But then that's more of the things I lean towards. So again, it's not really fair to ding it a star for that. So yeah, probably 4 out of 5.
I find that's like the balance you have to strike in like rating books is like balancing like your personal taste and also just like the quality of the book too, you know? Because you do want your ratings to like reflect what you like too. Because you're not going to be like, this is a 5-star book, but also I don't like it that much, you know? Like, so it's like kind of finding that middle ground sometimes.
Like you can tell it's quality, but you're like, it's not the type of thing I usually would go for.
Yeah, a lot of times that's when I give something like 4 stars because I'm like, it's a really good quality book, but not for me. Yeah.
Shout out to people in the comments. We had Paget who hopped in for a minute to say hello. And Ed Griswold who gave the book 4 stars and said, I wish the book was just a little longer. I definitely felt that as well. If you haven't read the book and don't care about spoilers, just are recapping because it's been a while. The premise of the book is that there are 2 girls who do not know that they are sisters. And when a plane crashes a month after 9/11, so based on like an actual plane crash, these 2 girls realize that they have the same father who was on the plane and died in the crash. And so it's kind of a story of them working through their grief and then finding out about each other and trying to decide, you know, what are they going to do about that now that they know that each other exist. So that's a super short summary of it.
But for me, that was the part I wanted to explore more of. It was like the sibling relationship was what I was interested in and learning about that when you're a teenager and all of the baggage that came with it. And I don't feel like we really touched on it a bit that much. Like it was kind of that angsty, oh, but she'll never really be my sister. And then they start to get to know each other and they're obviously going to have a future together, but we don't get to see any of that. So that's what I wanted to explore more of. Like I get why the crash part was kind of fast, although I did want a little more of that, what the experience was for them. But I really wanted to see that sibling relationship and that blended awkward family dynamic with both of their extended families and all of that. And it just wasn't quite as much as I was hoping for.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about this a lot leading up to this chat because I felt very similarly, but I didn't feel like I wanted this, like I didn't feel like I wanted anything cut from this. Like it almost felt more like I just wanted a sequel. Like I want to know what happens next. Yeah,
I'd love to see like their like life together in New York and what they like get to do with their futures.
I also thought it would feel like more of a, I don't know, like a twist when one of the sisters would be revealed to the other. Like I would think there's constant news updates to be like, oh, like here's the victims list and like this is the survived by his daughter and mother and wife or something, and then the other girl would hear that and be like, what? So I was kind of expecting like a shocking twist like that, but that didn't really come. Although that might be a case of like that's not how that would have happened with the flight crash.
Well, because like there's like the one girl, she doesn't know about the sister, Yahira, she doesn't know about the sister, but she knows about the other wife. And then like Camino, I can get why that wouldn't have happened for her because like it doesn't seem like she really has like a ton of access to like the news and things.
So it makes also 2001, so like there wasn't a ton of like internet back then.
And she's in like a pretty rural area too. So and then like they're like kind of denying that Camino is her daughter or his daughter too, like so that she doesn't get the money. So it makes sense why neither of them has that moment, but I agree that it would have been like interesting to have a more like shocking moment.
Reveal,
I like it. It feels like no matter how they would have found out about it, it's shocking. But I didn't like it felt more like a dull shock, which made sense with like how they were feeling. But like for me, it was a little more like, oh, I would be absolutely stunned, not just like, whoa.
I think it has to do with the setting though of it, because it's like something like that would be really shocking if you weren't also just completely grieving this person that you thought you knew really well. That it's like, oh, okay, sure, I have a sister.
It's like the really shocking thing has already happened.
Yeah.
The dad dying.
Yeah, I was definitely bothered as well by like the character of the dad being a few times described as like complicated. And I was like, no, he was just an asshole that was cheating and living a double life. He wasn't complicated. Like I also know that it's through the point of view of his daughters who loved him and are grieving. So I like totally acknowledge that. But as a reader, I was like,
it would be very different and very interesting from the points of views of like the wives, like I feel like they would have very different feelings.
I did think that was really well written. I felt like all of the adults that were on page were extremely well fleshed out. Felt like they were, even if we weren't seeing it on the page, they were definitely living out this full story as well. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the book.
I think that Yahira's mom is like one of my favorite characters in it because
Absolutely.
she's very complex. Like she doesn't make the right decision every time, but like you understand why.
Yeah, she's not a bad person. It's just it's complicated. Even
You're
if
like, I'd be mad too.
I thought it was really interesting too when when they got told about the money that was going to be coming through and like all the relatives started swarming her. I was like, oh yeah, because like that absolutely is something that happens. And I would have actually liked to see even a little bit more of that. But again, like there's a lot of stuff that like the book is short enough that it didn't maybe really fit. But yeah, I was like, oh, predatory, relatives coming out of the woodwork is like just so realistic.
But her response to like give them a lot of what she was asking for was a great effect on me as a reader, just like knowing what the other side of that coin was and how much that money that she's just throwing away could help someone else.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know that whole situation. She has a lot of her own baggage of why she wouldn't want to do that. But for me as a reader, it was so frustrating. Of like,
it was
please
frustrating.
stop.
Yeah.
Not even like obviously because like the jerk face had a daughter he had essentially left in a lurch, but also because I was like, stop, like they're coming out of the woodwork. They barely talk to you because you married him, and now they're like, oh hey, slide into your DMs, and you're like, no, you abandoned her. Like,
and she's like so concerned about Camino trying to take advantage of them for the money, but like she's not concerned about her own relatives trying to take advantage of her for the money.
Yeah. Although she was like understandably protective because Camino literally did be like, oh, your passport, yoink.
Yeah.
Like, that was the plan.
And part of it comes from like her having grown up there too, and she like understands what it's like.
Yeah,
but like
exactly.
I think Yahira doesn't like realize how bad it is there, and so she doesn't like realize how desperate that Camino might be, where like her mom gets it.
Yeah, for sure. We had a comment from N. Griswold. I don't think the dad saw it as leading a double life. His first wife knew everything, as well as the aunt raising his daughter on the island. I think it's just one of those things we keep from kids.
Yeah, he's still a jerk face. Zero sympathy. I was like,
unless both wives knew all of the details, then no.
And we're like cool with it. Like it wasn't really a potential thing. And they were like best friends, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
Doubly crappy for the first wife who got super betrayed, and also keeping it from both girls, and then being so crappy to Camino, who's like, oh, you're just like the side daughter who I only see 4 months of the year. Like, that's nice. She's not the one that needs more or anything. Like, rude.
Yeah, I don't know why. I never felt super like, oh, he sucks. Like, obviously.
That's because you're reading the filter of like girls who loved him, which was really well done.
Yeah, for sure. I think
that's time I was reading, I was still like, men are trash.
It was hard for me to wrap my head around either one being all like, yeah, this is just how it is. For like when their dad wasn't with them, there was just kind of no contact. That's it.
Yeah.
Like he bounces from one life to the other one and kind of turns the other one off for a while, no matter what happens.
They don't even have a phone number for him. Like, oh, and the fact that I thought for sure this would come up later as like Camina being like mad at her dead father, essentially, because the money came too late, right? So her mom didn't get to the hospital and therefore died. And it's like, oh, if you weren't off living this double life, my mother would still be alive. Right? Like, I for sure thought that was going to come back and have her have this realization and be like furious with him and heartbroken all over again, but that never really came up again. So yeah,
it almost a lot of times for me felt like we didn't see them long enough to really get into like the anger. Like there was so much shock and so much like devastation from the shocking thing happening that if we had stayed with them longer, like I assumed they would get very angry. And not that like, wasn't angry. Like she was angry about a lot of things, but she had a very large list of things to be angry about. So,
and I think it's like very hard to be angry when you're like grief is still so new, because you're also like grieving this person that you really love, and like I think there's like some guilt in like feeling angry, like oh, I can't feel angry, they're dead.
Yeah, that would be such a like confusing, complicated thing to
like try you're never gonna get closure on it. You never get to ask them any questions about it.
Especially because like her mom isn't even still alive either, so she can't even ask her mom questions about it.
Yeah, for sure.
And then which one of them wasn't even talking to him when one of them was like
Yahaira.
Yeah, because she stopped playing chess and she wasn't talking to him, and then essentially he died. So I almost would have expected more of that, like huge regret, because I like what was the last thing I even said to him? Like I would think that she would have thought of that and that type of thing. But
I think she does think about how like it's like when he left, she like didn't say anything to him or something.
There's one brief mention.
But it was such a quick book that everything was just kind of a brief mention. Like it didn't dwell on anything really.
I feel like it kind of needed to be a bit longer, to be honest. Also, because it was a short book, and then like not only is it skinny, it's like all in verse, so there's like only a few verses per page, and I was like,
It's interesting that your copy is skinny because mine is like 400 pages.
Yeah, looking at the hardcovers, I'm surprised.
I'm not here.
Yeah, mine's 400 pages.
Yeah.
This to me is
there's not very much text on each.
Yeah, yours looks more condensed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's not a ton of text, but it is like kind of thicker.
I wonder how many words it comes out to.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Very many, probably.
It can't be a ton, though.
No.
Yeah.
I was really interested from a writing standpoint the whole time. Like I try to read poetry and like to get better at making all my words count in my own writing. And it really felt like in this, it was like, well, every sentence has to count because there are so few sentences compared to like a novel that's not in verse.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a word limit for Elizabeth when she writes these, if her editors like only go to a certain word count. And we have to, because of it being verse, if at a certain point you, I don't know, like would lose your readers or something. Maybe
I just Googled this and it says, this is southwestwriters.com, says that novels in verse are usually around 20,000 words.
Okay, so significantly shorter, which makes sense. It's going to be shorter than a novel. But yeah, I would have definitely kept reading if there had been more like exploration of how they dealt with things, and like, because the grief would turn to anger and so forth. And it would be interesting seeing them in New York, like how she would adapt to living in New York and everything too, right?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think it's like, oh, well, they said you can't have that more than that many words, because she's pretty successful. True. I think it was just like the story that she wanted to tell was different than the one I was expecting at first, if that makes any sense. It was much more about like grief in the short term rather than like grief over a long period of time. One of the things that I found interesting, because we were all alive when this plane crash happened, but we were all pretty young. So like I didn't even remember that had happened.
Yeah, I'd never heard about this crash.
Yeah.
No.
And so I thought it was really interesting reading, particularly like the author's note at the end about it. And just like learning about this thing that like should be a lot more talked about in the US. But yeah, if you haven't read it yet, based on a real thing that happened.
And apparently there were like families who learned that there were two families.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Comedian even said that, like, oh, she sounds so shocked, but it's like common over here. that people have a affair going on, or two families or whatever. Like, interesting.
And Griswold said, I was waiting for Yahira to blame the dad's death on Camino since he was going to visit her when the plane crashed. Yeah, I think I definitely kept waiting for that moment too.
I'm glad that it didn't happen though. Like, I think that really would have, like, it would be natural for somebody to do, but at the same time, like, I was really happy when they did come together and like leaned on each other in the end to like help each other with grief and the situation of them bringing her back to New York and everything. Because like, it really bothers me when like women find out that men have been doing horrible things to them and then they just want to kill each other. And I'm like, no, you're mad at the wrong person.
I think it would have been really easy to make it a story like that. And I appreciate that she didn't.
Yeah, I'm glad she didn't.
And as a reader, I felt just like extremely tense leading up to it, like wondering, like, is that the direction this is going to go? But then when they met, it felt very much like an exhale, like, oh, we did it, we got to each other, and like it's not going to be easy from here on out, but like we found each other. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it for sure.
I really loved her aunt. Just yeah, she with the machete at the end. I was like,
yes, that was incredible. All of those people coming together at the end. I loved it. Did I just see lightning flash in your window, Emma? It was so bright.
Yikes.
It's like perfect timing for talking about that night.
Yeah, because it was raining really hard during the scene, right?
Yeah. Did anyone have any thoughts about like that aspect of the plot? And what's the guy called El Cerro?
I think so, yeah.
I read this book in April. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Just like, I mean, like, I absolutely understand why that was in there, and it made it realistic because, and also it was like pushing her to the point of doing something desperate.
It raised the stakes more for her.
Yeah, for a really good reason. I always have mixed feelings about these types of plots in books because it makes me so angry that I can't like enjoy the media anymore. Like if it's a TV series or a book, it makes me like on edge and angry the whole time. But at the same time, I think she did a really good job with it. It didn't feel like it was inserted for shock value. It didn't feel it felt like it was handled really well and realistically. So, but they're hard parts. They're hard to read.
Yeah. Elsa. I thought it was really interesting how like she used to be best friends with his little sister. And like he changed after his sister died. I thought that was an interesting like piece to the story. That he wasn't just like this like kind of like caricature like bad dude, you know, like
just ominous really villain shadow hovering over the story kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, there was a history with her dad and
yeah, I think it would have been very easy for a less talented writer to make that a really one-dimensional villain. We had a comment from Anne Griswold. They were both so mature. A lot of things you'd expect to see just didn't matter once they decided to be sisters to one another. For sure.
Yeah, I can't remember which POV it was, but I thought it was really beautiful when she talked about like all the things the crash and her father's betrayal had taken away, and then it had given her this, and then she was referring to her sister. So yeah, there was a few times that I was like, oh, I have a tear.
One of the structural things that I thought was really interesting about the book was that in the beginning, you have really distinct, like, it's this point of view. It's this point of view. And then in the last section, it's all combined. So it's like omniscient, and you have to just use context clues to figure out who's saying what. And I thought that was really well done as well. I don't feel like I ever struggled to figure out who was speaking or thinking. because they were just so different.
Mm-hmm. I think initially, because it was in verse, my brain took a little longer to adjust. Like, she did it wonderfully, but the voice of all of it was in verse in my head, rather than what their voices were. It was like me reading it in a particular way, rather than their voices coming through probably as clear as they should have if I read the genre more often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've only read one other novel in verse, and it was a romance. But it was very different.
It's been a long time for sure. And I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Like, yeah, I thought I would struggle more to actually stay connected to the story. But it was beautifully written, so.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any parts that you wanted to discuss? I know book club, we almost always run short, especially when we all liked the book. So I almost guarantee we'll end early today.
I was just looking through on Goodreads. Elizabeth Acevedo has some like annotations for the book in there. And so I was like looking through them, and something she brought up that I'd forgotten about was like how like she like shows like the lessons he taught each girl, how like, and like the connections he had with each of them, where like with Yahaira it was chess and like teaching her like how to like be like assertive and all these things. And it was like Camino, it was swimming and teaching her like the strength of that. And so I thought I'd forgotten about that, but I really liked seeing how he had like different relationships with both of them. He didn't like teach both of them the same thing and have like the exact same relationship with them. He like, they were very different girls for him.
Yeah, and it definitely felt like, even though he made some dubious choices about, spending time with each of them and keeping secrets and stuff, it felt like he was trying to be a good father to both of them that whole time.
Yeah, and like the annotation is from the line, I think this is talking to Yahaira about chess. He says, "Fight until you can't breathe, and if you have to forfeit, you forfeit smiling. Make them think you let them win." And then she said, "As I was writing, I wanted to make sure that the lessons that Papi taught each girl were really specific to the kind of relationship he had with them and what he imagined they might need if he was no longer around." I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, there's a quote from one of them that talks about how he was a good father and a bad husband, essentially. Like, that's accurate.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I'm looking through my notes here that I had to make sure we did not miss anything. We're probably going to be wrapping up soonish, so let us know if there's any last minute things you want to hear us discuss with regards to the book, and we will try to do that. I think that's everything. Big recommend for this book. I know we spoiled it, but we also really didn't.
Yeah, a lot of that you get from the back copy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's pretty much in the description of the book.
Yeah, for sure. It was gorgeous. No amount of talking about the plot can convey how gorgeously written it was. Big recommend. I'm hoping to listen to it on audiobook later this year. Do a reread of it. And
she reads all her own audiobooks, you were saying? See, because I feel like next time that would be a better way to go for me. Yeah. I feel like if she's a spoken word poet, this is how you're supposed to read it, is have it read to you.
Yeah, I liked the Poetics that way. I definitely feel like I connected with the story of this one more than the Poetics. The Poetics is all her books are very quiet and introspective, but I feel like that one's even more so. Where this one had a little bit more plot to it and a little bit more conflict to it. And then her second book you might like better because it's a prose book. So With the Fire on High is actually in prose, and it's really good too. I like that one a lot.
I love the cover of that one.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Gorgeous. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up there then. If anyone doesn't, or if no one has any final thoughts, read the book. Next week we are kicking off our Preptober series. We're going to be doing an ideas workshop, helping you generate the bare bones of a book. that will hopefully get you through to the end of Nano. We are also going to be doing all Preptober themed chats. Let me pull up the graphic that I have so I can make sure I don't miss anything. So yeah, on the 4th, we're doing an idea workshop to develop the framework for your November project. On the 11th, we're doing a character workshop to craft compelling characters who can last to the end of November. The 18th will be plotting. It is what the title says. And the 25th is going to be a brainstorming bonanza, which will be a game night that will help you embrace the chaos of NaNoWriMo. And then we are going to be doing a midnight write-in on October 31st. So we hope that you will like and subscribe so that you can see all that content as it comes. Ooh, I have a book recommendation from Anne Griswold in the discussion section. I will have to check that out. Thank you for that. And yeah, so please like and subscribe. We're going to have so many cool things going on, gearing up for NaNoWriMo, and we would love to have you with us. And yeah, we have videos Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we will be back here again next week at 7:30. Bye.
Bye.